It was the eve of the war in Iraq. The U.S. military mobilized tens of thousands of troops into Kuwait. Hundreds of reporters embedded with U.S. military units so they could report from the front lines.
This is the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division.
David Bloom was a colleague and a friend. Everyone at NBC knew that he was a rising star at the network.
David, we'll see you soon. Please stay safe.
Thanks, Soledad. We're looking forward to getting back home.
Bloom's friend and NBC News correspondent, Kerry Sanders.
Even as David became the anchor at NBC News on the Weekend Today, every story he did, he was excited to make sure that he was discovering something new, and he wanted you to come right along with him.
Bloomy was just a bundle of enthusiasm and passion for what he did.
Richard Liebner, Bloom's agent and friend.
If you talked with David, if you worked with David, he had to get under your skin. You had to plug into him. He was just so warm and so involved.
The war in Iraq was the biggest story of Bloom's life, and he reported it in a new way.
We're with the 2nd Brigade, the 315 Infantry. They were the first unit from this division to enter into southern Iraq last night.
Bob Woodruff of ABC News was David's close friend.
What he did with his Bloommobile was something that had never been done before, which was he was able to go live on a real broadband satellite constantly while he was moving through the desert.
Bloom and his Bloommobile on-the-move reports brought the war into the American living room.
If I can ask my photographer, Craig White, to pan forward here, you can see just a cloud of dust, but that's dozens of tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles moving through the desert of south-central Iraq.
Bloom, a man who truly loved his wife and children, spared no effort to stay in constant touch with his 3 daughters, Christine, Ava, and Nicole, and his wife, Melanie. Melanie Bloom reads one of David's emails to his 9-year-old, Nicole.
And yes, my dear sweet girl, when I'm a little bit scared, I promise you I'll remember you and your sisters and your mom, and I will know in my heart just how much you love me, to the moon and back, right?
Bloom made sure that he was in the center of the action.
Tom, we're under attack right now.
The danger of combat and difficult desert conditions weren't the only problems.
We all slept with our legs up in the air, our legs pulled up to our chests. I mean, it was horribly uncomfortable. Dave, was doing the same thing. We were dehydrated, stressed, we were cramped.
By April 2, 2003, the 3rd Infantry Division drove to within several hundred miles of Baghdad. Bloom's cameraman, Craig White.
He complained of what he thought was a pulled muscle. Later that day, we walked over to a medic, and we got some ibuprofen for a little bit of pain, and didn't think too much of it.
April 4th, 2 days later.
David called his doctor. The doctor said that, well, you could just have a pulled muscle, but it could be something much more serious. And if that's the case, it's a blood clot formed in the leg, and that can be life-threatening, so you really ought to seek some medical attention.
This sandstorm has been pounding these troops here in the
I think it would have taken 2 very large WWE wrestlers to get him off the Bloommobile.
And David knew that probably our best chance to get out of Iraq was maybe a day and a half in advance from Baghdad airport. As we get closer to Baghdad, bodies started to pile up. Blood would run across the roads. We knew what happened to Jessica Lynch and the people who were executed. So David started to come face to face with the fact that you could die out there.
It was April 5. Bloom, as usual, was more concerned about others than himself.
He called me, and he just said to the person on the desk, try to patch me through to Bob. And they said, well, we can't get hold of him right now. And he said, well, just tell him to take care of himself and keep his head down.
He just found out a couple hours ago that his wife Erica had a baby about 2 weeks or so ago. So I'm going to give this headset to him and let him talk to his wife here.
I woke the morning of April 6th, and David, he said, I found out last night we're leaving. We're going into Baghdad. We're going in about an hour. So he was very heartened when he found out that we were on our way to Baghdad.
The up-close experience of death transformed Bloom. As he did so many times, he poured out his heart to his wife Melanie in an email.
Here I am, supposedly at the peak of professional success, and I could frankly care less. Yes, I'm proud of the good job we've all been doing, but in the scheme of things, it matters little compared to my relationship with you and the girls and Jesus.
Then, things started to happen rapidly.
And then I saw someone horizontal in the dirt. And I looked over, looked again, and it was David. And I ran over and saw David slightly up on one elbow with a dazed look on his face. Immediately, I yelled, "Medic!" We got an IV in him. I held him by the hand, by the arm. He looked up at me, and his pupils just dilated out and fixed.
Several hours later, in the midst of a battle just outside of Baghdad, Bloom's unit received the terrible news.
The sergeant sitting in front of me on the M88, I remember him ripping off his helmet and just yelling, "Oh God!" And I knew what it was. He reached his hand back to me, and I grabbed his hand and bit my lip and fought back the tears, and it was real. David was gone.
When I called in to my wife, who gave me the news, was about as shocking of a thing as I'd ever heard. I said to my wife, "What do you mean he passed away? You don't pass away in a war. You're either killed or you live. Was he shot?" She said, "No, he had some kind of embolism." You know, it didn't make sense to me.
I was prepared for a bullet or a bomb, but not this.
And just to watch his eyes, his pupils dilate out and fix, it's an image that's haunted me. I can't get rid of it. It's awakened me in the middle of the night. I'll never forget it.
There was a much larger...
I mean, there's no question in my mind that Dave died because of the combat that was happening around him. You know, he was not going to die of an embolism if he were covering the White House. He died of an embolism because he was covering war.
I find it hard to accept that David did not come home.
Yes, we consider David one of our own and part of our ranks. And I believe the biggest thing that impressed me about David is he lived the life of our soldiers here on the battlefield. Task force! Attention! Present!
The loss of David Bloom affected many of us deeply, but his passing devastated his family. His last email demonstrates what an extraordinary human being and friend and father David Bloom was.
When the moment comes in my life when you are talking about my last days, I am determined that they will say he was devoted to his wife and children, and he gave every ounce of his being, not for himself, but for those whom he cared about most, God and his family. Save this note. Look at it a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I love you, and I know that you love me. Please give the girls a big hug, squeeze them tight, and let them know just how much their daddy loves and cares for them. With love and devotion, Dave.